Hello, everyone, and welcome back to SALT Talks. My name is John Darcy. I'm the managing director of SALT, which is a global thought leadership forum and networking platform at the intersection of finance, technology, and public policy. SALT Talks are a digital interview series with leading investors, creators, and thinkers. And our goal on these SALT Talks is the same as our goal at our SALT conferences, which is to provide a window into the mind of subject matter experts, as well as provide a platform for what we think are big ideas that are shaping the future. And we're very excited today to welcome Brooke Baldwin to SALT Talks. Brooke is a Peabody Award finalist who anchors the 3 p.m. edition of CNN Newsroom. She's also the creator and host of CNN's digital series, American Woman, which focuses on the stories of trailblazing women who have broken barriers in their respective fields and are now helping other women do the same. Brooke's new book, Huddle, How Women Unlock Their Collective Power, is a blend of journalism and personal narrative examining how women have come together in a wide variety of times and places to provide each other with support, empowerment, inspiration, and the strength to solve problems and enact meaningful change. Brooke has crisscrossed the country to research and write this book, revealing how huddling helps women achieve success in the workplace, affect grassroots change, build confidence during girlhood, maintain better physical and mental health, survive racial and gender-based oppression, and weather the COVID-19 pandemic. By speaking with historians and researchers, Brooke also learned ways that huddling has often been key to women's survival across multiple generations. Hosting today's talk, making her debut here on SALT Talks, is a Scaramucci, but not Anthony Scaramucci. It's Anthony's wife, Deirdre, who formerly was a director of investor relations at Skybridge. She left that role to help raise a family, but she also hosted the Mooch and the Misses podcast alongside Anthony, and is a intellectual heavyweight in her own right. And we're very excited to have her here on SALT Talks. And I also want to say shout out to Brooke for being a North Carolina Tar Heel. I grew up in
Tar Heels.
So I had to give that shout out to all my North Carolinians out there. But
now that you introduced Deirdre Scaramucci, this will be my last SALT Talk, Brooke, okay? For sure, I'm going to be blocked out of this.
I need double trouble today.
Going
I need double trouble.
So I just want to thank everybody for listening to me during this SALT Talk series. It was very nice of all of you.
It's been a fun run.
It's been a fun run, and I look forward to being replaced by Deidre Scaramucci. But in the meantime, it's all been good. But Deidre Scaramucci, take it away. What a book,
Well, Brooke,
Mrs. Mooch.
Baldwin, congratulations.
Oh, he's still talking. He's always talking.
Still talking. Still talking.
Thank you for having me. I mean, it's been 2 years since I've had like an adult conversation. So this is very special for me. So I'm honored that you asked me to join you.
Of course. I said to your husband, it's a book about, unlocking the power among women. Thank you. Shout out of the book cover. And not that I don't love your husband to death, but, I thought Mrs. Mooch could join.
Yeah, of course. I bring the funk.
You do.
So
Bring it.
I love the forward, by the way. Because moms are the best.
To my mom,
right? Yeah.
who, by the way, I was just texting with her. The book has not landed at her front doorstep yet. So she doesn't even know I dedicated it to her.
Let me not say anything, but that's a very sweet thing.
No, thank you.
That will make her life.
She's my original Huddle.
Right. And that will make her life.
Yeah.
And also she dedicated it on the second half to James.
I did.
Loving that.
Anthony, did you see that? What did I read? Yes. Read what I said to
also
Anthony.
For James, my husband, thank you for loving me and Pugsley and for being one of many good men who support women huddling.
We need the men to support the ladies.
It's very beautiful. And James is our kind of guy. He's been usually helpful to us and SALT.
Mm-hmm.
He
I just want to say
this in 2019.
I crack up because I watch, I follow you on Instagram. So I watch you like stalk him and annoy him. And every time I see him,
he's like, really, Brooke, do we need to do another IG story? Can I just make your breakfast or can I just eat my food and you not bother me?
You guys have like very fun dynamics because he's so dry.
He loves you guys.
And English and you are just spunky. So it's funny.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's get to it. So tell us about the book. Obviously, it's called The Huddle, How Women Unlock Their Collective Power. And so how did you come up with this idea of a huddle?
So I think growing up in Atlanta, I'm a Georgian, but yes, Chapel Thrill undergrad. So growing up in Atlanta, I had just a really happy girlhood. I was involved in all kinds of things, whether it was everything from gymnastics before I realized I would be 5'9", whoops, or, tap dancing or soccer, whatever. I was all about it. And I had lots of awesome huddles as a girl. And I think ultimately then played sports in high school, had huddles, went off to college, and then made career my number one. And so when I was graduating Carolina and all of my girlfriends were moving off to New York City and living in, the East Village with illegally with 5 women and having a good time and living their best Sex in the City life, I was moving to small town America where I was pursuing my dream of journalism. And, growing up too, I admired women journalists like Jane Pauley and Katie Couric and Barbara Walters, and of course, Oprah. Like, we're all still living in the era of Oprah. Right. And I just assumed that it was a women-friendly profession. Little did I know that, when I got into my first job, it would just be some women with some really sharp elbows. And so that's like my early arc. And then after, I'm just going to skip a bunch of years and a lot of hard work and sacrifice and crappy hours. I wound my way up with my dream job at CNN, and I was covering the Trump inauguration. And the one day, like on the back of this flatbed truck and embedded in this Trump motorcade as he's going to the White House for the first time. And then the very next day, there I am in the middle of the Women's March and seeing women coming together for a multitude of reasons. For the first time in my life, I was basically in the middle of this giant huddle. So number one, I realized something special was happening with women in America, and I wanted in on it, and I wanted to dedicate the next chapter of my career to it. And then two, I had my own, took my reporter hat off and was like, well, would I show up here with a bunch of women? Do I even have a huddle of women who would have shared a tank of gas to go to Washington with me? And the answer, Deirdre, is I didn't. Mm-hmm. And I knew that in that moment forward, I would need to activate my own huddle, and I want readers to learn how to do the same.
Right. It's an important balance. My mom always tells me, no matter what you do, make sure you keep your girlfriends. And
always.
It's important. But when you're building your career, when you're working super hard, I remember, when I first started working, I never saw my friends. And it's a really hard thing to maintain. But I think as we get older, it hits home and you probably become more focused on it. But it is something we need for hard times. There's just some things, a husband or a friend that's a guy, or they just can't.
They can't be everything to us at all times. They just can't.
Right.
And also, I think looking back to my 20s and early 30s when I was super lonely and putting career first, and I don't regret that time, but I had amazing singular girlfriends, but they were living all over the country and they were becoming first-time mothers or working on their own careers. And we just I didn't have a huddle. I did not have a girl group, a tribe, a sisterhood in the way that I do now. And it has changed my life.
Right. Time does help that out though. You meet people as you go along and then you kind of introduce them and they come together. We're not born with a huddle. I have a bunch of girlfriends from high school that are still friends, and that's like a 1 in a million thing. Most people don't have that. I'm very fortunate, but as time goes on, I have friends of that I've made through my kids and school, and you build as you go along. But Anthony, are you there?
I'm listening. You guys are in the huddle. I'm not trying to interrupt the huddle.
What do you think about a girl huddle? Because I'm surrounded. Brooke, I don't know what your siblings are.
I have a younger brother, so it's the two of us.
It's just another guy. I'm surrounded by only guys. I have brothers, sons, and nephews. So yeah.
It's a lot of testosterone, man. That's
what I'm saying. I'm interested in knowing what Anthony thinks about girl huddles, because I don't have any of that going on in the home place. And now Brooke is stuck with James. Is Pugsley a boy?
Oh, I'm going to say something that's obviously going to get me in trouble. Even her dog is
a boy.
I'm going to say something that's going to obviously get me in trouble. I feel that there is a different way that women bond with each other than men. So obviously that will probably get me in trouble. Perhaps that's politically.
No, this is super interesting. This is interesting. But you have a big family. I bet you came from, I think it traditionally, right? I think men have for so long gotten together, whether it's playing sports or, going and having a golf game and networking or having that happy hour. I think it just kind of has come naturally to you guys.
So let me say something that's very stereotypical and very general, and then the both of you can yell at me, but this has been my 57-year observation. that men sort of bond in like sort of a hunter-gathering mode. And so if we're fighting with each other, we sort of get over it pretty quickly. I feel like women have a little bit of a shell in the beginning, but then once they've shared some level of vulnerability with each other, they become incredibly close. And in some ways, their bond, their sororital bond, is tighter than a fraternal bond because they've seen each other's vulnerability and then they fuse together and are in a complete huddle. You know, I feel like men are more in like a bee swarm. Anyway, I don't know if that's going to get me canceled. This is my last Salt Talk anyway. Darcy knows that Deirdre's outshining me every second of this Salt Talk. No. So this is my last Salt Talk, but I just thought I would just point out that. And what is your observation of that, Brooke? Am I wrong in saying that?
Listen, I can only speak from my own experience, but I think you hit on the key word on vulnerability. And that is one of the key pillars of having a huddle is showing up vulnerably. And also I would argue that women are not really...
I got that out of your book, by the way.
Well,
I mean, that
well
to
done.
me was... Yeah.
Yes, I think that's key. I mean, I'm a big Brene Brown follower and she talks a lot about vulnerability and courage. And I think you have to show up vulnerably, authentically, and you have to ask for help, which I think we as women, especially I look to my women friends who are mothers. I mean, women wear a lot of hats, right? Especially now in the pandemic, mothers, caretakers, in some cases, breadwinners, community leaders, suddenly at-home teachers. There's a lot happening for women. And so I just think women aren't really good at raising their hands and saying, "Hey, can you help me?" But that's what part of the magic within the huddle is when you decide to link arms with one another and help one another and show up vulnerably and ask for help. And if you've lost a job because of this horrible time we've been living in, like I believe your sisters will truly want to share the wealth and help you out. I think our culture loves to pit women against one another. Like think of all the movies and the Broadway shows and everything else, but that's not the whole story. And that's not the focus for me. It's the opposite.
Do you think COVID kind of shined more of a light on this kind of thing, given the crisis that we're all in and the help we probably need more than ever now?
I think it shined two lights. Number one, it showed that, women and especially women of color were disproportionately affected by this pandemic and losing jobs and having to give something up as they were, spinning a lot of plates at home. Number one, and acknowledging that. And just number two, I don't know about you, Deirdre, but for me, I've never been closer with my girlfriends than this pandemic. I totally took for granted the gift of connection and physically hanging out and taking girl trips and, networking with a group of women in person. And so for me, I've really had this opportunity as we've been sitting still at home and flexing my huddling muscle, flexing the muscles of, doing things like Zooming and Marco Polo and these technology things I was super not hip to prior to the pandemic. And now I think my hope is that when we come out of this thing, that ultimately after flexing these muscles, women will really have space to kick ass and bring about change. And I'm really hopeful for that. What do you think?
Well, I think so. I mean, I've never spoken to my friends as much as I have now.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, because we're at home and we're like, hey, this is going on. My son is going through this, or my daughter's going through this. Are you going through this? Or, you're around your husband all the time. He's home all day. Like, are you okay? Are you, on each other's nerves? Just bouncing stuff off of each other. Just ways to make best
castration is permanent, Brooke Baldwin. Castration is permanent. There's always a threat of that in the Scaramucci house.
But we've really uplifted each other. We've maneuvered and found ways to eventually see each other after many months. And it was just so nice.
You and your girlfriends.
Yeah. And, just to come together safely and have our kids interact. And just for me or for them or for anyone, just to talk to an adult. Like I said it in the beginning, I was half joking, but half not. I mean, it could be worse, but I spend most of the time talking to young people, which is great.
Right.
But sometimes just
but you need to have adult conversations.
Right. I mean, to stay stimulated, to stay alive and happy.
Yeah.
So I've looked to them for that a lot.
Can I ask you a follow-up on that, which is to your husband's point about vulnerability, like what kinds of, because I think of my own text chain, which I didn't even have a group text chain with the ladies in my life before this,
right.
before like the journey that was Huddle. And I mean, we text about everything from, are we too old for jean shorts, to what we think about the elections,
no, the answer is no.
to, you know, mental health and depression through the pandemic, to the racial reckoning in this country. Like nothing is off limits to our marriages.
All of that. We talk about all of that. And the interesting thing is we are coming from many different places ideologically, surprisingly enough.
Interesting.
So we have had some really interesting conversations, whether it be about the vaccine, about quarantining, about how we're handling school. I mean, everything has been so interesting to hear people because we're so similar. And in many ways, and we grew up around each other, but life has brought us to different places and we've made completely different choices during this whole thing. And it's just been so interesting to see. And also you're saying about vulnerability, being vulnerable to be honest about how we feel about certain things, whether it's the riots, you know, women's empowerment, whatever it is, the election. And we've just been really honest without judgment, which I think judgment is another thing. Vulnerability is one. And people are afraid to be vulnerable because of judgment. And
but not when you're in a safe space like a Huddle.
Right. But
judgment is not allowed.
Those, to be honest, as an adult, navigating the waters of adulthood and meeting people, I have yet to meet many people at this stage in life that I've been able to break through. I think people assume things about each other. They prejudge. And I think it's really inhibiting. I really do. I think it stops a lot of people from gaining relationships and also just making differences because you're like so bound up that you don't get past a certain point. I don't know if you've ever witnessed that because you're pretty open and
I try to be really open and I think I attract other women in my circles who are equally open. I'm trying to think of, I don't have any friends who are just sort of like myopic or singularly minded. I don't have time for that. And I come from, I come from Georgia. I come from, a lot of Republicans in my family. And here I'm living in Manhattan, surrounded by a lot of like left-leaning folks. And I remember my mom, when I was a kid, she was always like, Brooke, you should be a judge. That was what she always thought I should become. And instead I became this journalist. But similarly, like trying to maintain my objectivity and always listening to the different sides and believing the truths in some cases lies somewhere in between. But I want to come back to a point you said about like your Huddle is comprised of women who are of various ideological backgrounds, because that 100%. To me is another key point of a Huddle is either diverse ideological backgrounds or making sure, members of your Huddle don't all look like you. That is we're definitely so important.
Like yeah. Well, it makes things more interesting to be, obvious.
Yeah.
But we're the same, but we're not. And it's been trying at some points. Like I'll tell Anthony, I don't know if we could see so-and-so because they think, differently than we do. And it's, sometimes it's thrown up some obstacles, but at the end of the day, you still remain close. And that's basically what we've done. But it's just interesting. We're very different. And one thing to say about you is following you on Instagram, you do attract that because you're very open, transparent. You're not always trying to play a character. You're very real.
Thank you.
Like you'll go on after a workout. You'll be like, you keep
not looking fun. All together, not looking like this.
No, but like that's cool because that makes people know that they can be real around you, or they can, they can pick up something from you. I always pick up something from your posts because they're just honest and authentic. And I like that, obviously.
Thank you, sister.
Big fan.
So Brooke, I want to ask something. Don Lemon wrote a book as well.
Yeah.
And John and I interviewed Don. He said something about the Trump era. It's not a political question. It's a sociological one.
Yeah.
He said that the Trump era exposed levels of racism that was probably passive aggressive, ripped the cover off of it. Yeah. And now we've gotten to see things. And in a weird way, he thinks that will actually make things better because now we're having a full frontal conversation.
Yep.
Do you think something like that also happened for women and in terms of the progress that women are making in the country as well?
Totally. I go back to the Women's March in 2017, the day after he was inaugurated and went to the White House for the first time. And I am mindful of activist Tamika Mallory, who was on the stage, who said something to the effect of, we are not here just because of one man. So I do agree with that. I think like any sort of moment and momentum is not all because of Donald Trump. I think having covered the 2015, 2016 presidential race and crisscrossing the country and being at rallies and showing up for various candidates, I just noticed women were showing up in ways I had never noticed in my career. And it wasn't just because they all were in it for Hillary. A lot of women were showing up for Bernie Sanders. A lot of women were showing up for Donald Trump. I think that what was the final vote? It was like 52% of white women voted for Donald Trump. So I just noticed women showing up. And then I think at the end of the day, you had this like wave as a result of the election. And then came, Me Too and Time's Up. And then we had never seen more women run for office in the 2018 midterms as we had before. And I remember going on Stephen Colbert in the wake of that. And we were talking about my series that I'd done here at CNN about how many of those women were Democrats. And I remember going on TV and saying, we need more women in office, left or right. And I was in touch with a couple of Republican women at the time who were saying it was really hard in the Republican Party. This was like 2018 to really break through because there were so many older white men in those, dark, smoky rooms who weren't as progressive and open-minded for these women candidates coming up and sharing the power with them. And they would even tell me anecdotes about how they were the candidate and they would be sitting at the table at a rally for themselves. And some of these guys would come up to the table and they'd be like, "Hi, what's your name and where's the candidate?" This is their own personal experience. And so I think it's wonderful that after the 2020 election, that a number of Republican women won seats on Capitol Hill. And so I do think that momentum is shifting for Republican women as well. At the end of the day, we only make up a quarter of the seats in Congress, and that number needs to improve.
That's well said.
I feel like we're living in a weird time, though. It's like, I'm not sure what's going on, but there seems to be a shift in many ways, health related, women's rights, just all these things. And so I'm just trying to figure out, are we living in the transitional period where we go through all the mess for
are we in the mess right now?
Yeah, are we
to
in
make
the
it
mess?
Better for the next generation?
Right. Or will we ever be living in a time where it's less messy and just
but don't you
natural?
Like the mess? Don't you like the mess a little bit? Like the change? I
like the mess. I like the change, but I would like it to be the situation and the circumstances to be settled and more natural, because I feel like right now there's a tug of war and a push and pull with a lot of things. And I just feel like it's very unsettled. So I'm just wondering if we'll ever live in that time, or will we see that time?
I don't know. Who's got a crystal ball?
You think?
Who's got a crystal ball? I don't know.
Well, do you think we can make enough of a
change?
Dent? Yeah.
I hope so, Deirdre. I hope so. I hope that women will, at the end of the day, for me and for this book, what I heard from everyone from CEOs to politicians to Hollywood actresses to women athletes, at the end of the day, they want to make sure that women have a bigger table, that it's no longer women fighting for few seats at the male table, but in fact, let's just build our own damn table. Right. And I think that slowly but surely that is happening. And I think one of the secrets to doing that is being a huddler and subscribing to this abundance mentality ethos. And I do hope that if I really want to create a movement of women subscribing to this versus the sharp elbow mentality, so that I do believe we can reach what you're describing, where we do build this table and we have a table full of women from all shapes, sizes, colors, creeds, ethnicities, everything. And it's sort of like adjacent to the men. And we need, we started the whole conversation. You were reading the dedication to my husband, because we need our men, and we need our men to support the huddle. So hopefully, yes, in our lifetime, we will have built this big, beautiful table for women. It's just a matter of everyone jumping on and going with it.
Do you think women that are in power right now are doing enough to make that kind of happen? Or do you think it's still could be worked on. I mean, I know there are obviously people that stick out in our mind that are always moving forward with this, but I feel like there could be more.
I'm sure there's a mix. I can only speak to the women I interviewed in this book. And so the women I interviewed in this book are all in it for everyone to win it. They're all, if they're not, many of them have the access to power and are then, as Megan Rapinoe famously said, are throwing down their ladders for younger women coming along. But sure, I mean, haven't you, like in my own career, I have experienced those women who are not the women's women, who are icy and want to have their sharp elbows and hold on to that lone woman position up top. And it's like, on the one hand, you sort of are like, listen, man, I understand where you are and why you're so icy and don't want to help other women, because you've had to claw, girlfriend. You have had to work your ass off to get to where you are. But then I think, why aren't you, now that you have this power, like help others achieve just a slice of what you have?
Yeah.
I think there's still, if I'm just being realistic, I think there's still a mix. What do you think?
Oh yeah, 100%. No, that's what I was saying. Even just right now, I'm not working. I did experience that when I was working. But even just navigating moms or whatever, not to stereotype or whatever, but
yeah,
just interesting. It's very hard for me to understand. And Anthony, I talk to him about it all the time. And he's like, well, for some reason, women are intimidated by other women. And I don't know what it is. Like, they automatically assume you are not going to be nice, or they automatically assume that you don't like them. And there's something that I don't know if
women can be the worst to one another, can't we?
Yes, very much. But I'm always trying to figure out, is it a taught, is it like a survival thing, or is it something innate, or something that we're taught? But I'm sure it's a combination of all those things. But I just wish we could, but people like you are, because you have a platform, you're showing people how to be successful, brilliant, attractive, and not too cool for school. Like,
right.
People still approach you.
Darcy, could you imagine if I was calling Brooke Baldwin successful and attractive on the Salt Talk? I mean, that would be it for me, right?
Anthony's the head of HR here at Skybridge.
Yeah,
that would be to keep things
for me.
very
I would take it as a compliment, Mr.
Okay, well, I appreciate that, Brooke.
Well, there's some of that too. That's an interesting thing I wanted to ask Brooke about. I think sometimes we're not striking enough of a balance between, and I'll get all Tony Robbins here, but like female energy and male energy, because I do believe, and you and I are born around the same time, that there is a distinct difference. And sometimes, and it doesn't mean
distinct difference between what?
Male energy and female energy.
Okay.
And I think sometimes we need to keep a little bit of that, because sometimes I feel like we have like an overbite where we're trying to make everybody exactly the same. So like what Anthony was saying, if he complimented you, I personally would never get offended if somebody complimented.
No, I would take it as a compliment.
Right. But I feel like, when I was coming onto this, I'm thinking, what can people say, not particularly in this conversation, but what doesn't offend somebody? What is still funny? I was just thinking about the time we live in, and you face that every day because you have to be on TV every day and ask questions off the cuff. Like, how do you know you're not offending somebody now? I feel like we are overly sensitive in some ways.
Gosh, I mean, that's a whole other conversation, and I am certainly not an expert in it, but I mean, I try to just maintain objectivity, and my gut just knows if I'm being offended, and I think the bigger thing for me is if I'm being offended to just speak up and say something about it. But I think you're asking, like, has the pendulum swung too far, and that people are getting so offended, and it's this like hyper PC culture, and when did that become a thing, and when can the pendulum swing back? And I don't know.
It's a weird thing, because you and I are living in a zone and a zip code where we transferred somewhere in between, where when we first started our careers, it was like borderline Mad Men-ish still, still acceptable. I worked on a trading floor and it was insane. And then now
you experienced it. You had the ick.
Totally. And now I'm like, I don't think anybody could say anything anymore. And I haven't been in an office environment, but it's really at the opposite end of the spectrum. So I just find it fascinating that has happened in probably a period of 15 years.
But don't you think that and I hear you loud and clear. And I feel like what I'm hearing is a little bit of an eye roll of like, come on, can somebody just say somebody's attractive? I think that there are many, many shades of what you're describing, but at least I would prefer the pendulum to be swinging more on the let's be appropriate side versus the, hey, you're a hot chick working on the trading floor and I'm going to be really inappropriate right now. And it's going to be swept under the rug because it's 1987, Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah, no, I agree. I just don't.
Brooke, 2007 and possibly 2017 on Wall Street.
Yeah.
Wow. I've just not been around the Wall Street culture. I mean, I can't even imagine. I always say that there's what you talking about, like, intuitively when you're being offended or not. Yeah.
We have 4.
Oh, Anthony has a great saying. What is it?
We have 4 sons, and I tell my adult sons, a woman knows right away charming versus creepy. Yeah. Right away. You can tell a woman her dress looks great. You look great tonight. You're saying it totally complimentary.
Yeah.
Without any, affront or anything like that. But then you could say this same sort of thing in this sort of leering, weirdo
staring
way.
In the wrong places.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden the woman is like, okay, this guy's out to lunch,
Yeah. So dial 911.
I'm hoping that we can keep the 5,000 year conversation between men and women.
Yeah.
Make it more appropriate, make women feel comfortable and make women feel safe. But the flip side is we also should be able to talk to each other in a way that is authentic without it being offensive. Does that make sense?
Totally
You summed
agree.
it up perfectly.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
When you write in the book about growing up and learning in an all woman's environment, tell us about that, because I think it's a fascinating thing. And I think it's somewhat helpful to women to think about it in that perspective. Tell us your insights there.
Well, I think I wanted to make sure I wrote a whole chapter about all girls learning environments, and mentioned a little bit about my own. And I tell this story. I did gymnastics for years and years. And there was one point when I was probably like 8 or 9, when I'm just like, I'm a sweater. I sweat. I work hard. I sweat. It's not cute. It's still not cute, but I've embraced it. All right. And I'm this 8 or 9-year-old in my leotard and my spandex or whatever. And I'm, doing the things around the bars and I'm soaking wet. And I remember this like precious bun in her hair, not a hair out of place, not the sweat stains under her armpits that I was rocking at the time. And I remember her saying to the coach, like, Coach, why does Brooke sweat so much? And I was mortified. I mean, I could still feel it now. And she turns to the girl and just quips back, because Brooke works twice as hard as you. And that was just a snapshot of what I remember from my youth, but being surrounded by girls doing gymnastics or girls in dance or whatever other sports I was doing at the time. And what I write about in the book is how now, if you have little girls, how there is such a broader spectrum of opportunities for them to step up to bat and fail and try again. Rashmi Sujani, amazing woman, incredible TED Talk, founded Girls Who Code. She talks a lot in her TED Talk about how when boys are brought up to jump to the 5th rung of the monkey bar, fall and jump up again, like be messy, fail, it's fine, try again. And girls are brought up to be a bit more perfect. And she wanted to start Girls Who Code to create a safe space for just girls who would do something really, really hard, like learn to code and fail, and create that space in which they can do that, and also build that like precious, those early days of confidence in girls. And so I write about in my book other examples of that, where I talked to Carly Kloss, the famous supermodel, who is such a huddler too. And I have her whole backstory, but she took me inside one of her coding camps, Code with Klossy. And I met all these girls who were doing something very similar. I mean, some of them didn't have access to computers. Certainly none of them had learned to code before, and creating a safe space where they can raise their hand without boys around, and, feeling like they could fail and then succeed. And similarly, Reese Witherspoon does this awesome young filmmaker lab with a bunch of girls in LA once a year with the help of AT&T. And so all these girls get to come out and they're carrying around all this fancy equipment, and they shoot a film, and they all take turns playing different roles, hosting the thing, shooting the thing, editing the thing. And it's the similar idea. And just how nowadays having girls, and I know you guys have boys, but having girls having these opportunities to fail and just from all the spectrum of things that are out there is just awesome.
Well, having boys, I feel like we're part of this. Like you said, we have to have men to support.
Yes.
And I was reading something yesterday. It was somebody wrote about their husband, and they were saying thank you to his mom for teaching him to be somebody who supported her and let her fail, cheered her on when she succeeded. And it made me think, we have our responsibility as parents of boys to raise people who will do that. And also, cheer on the girl, like do what I'm doing, go for it. Like our young son is 7 and he always says, I love this girl in my class. Like she plays Fortnite, and he thinks she's so cool. And he's like, I don't know any girls that do that, Mom. And that is so cool. And she's the one girl he invited to his birthday party.
That's
and I want him to always be that way. Like, do what I'm doing. That's awesome. So I think as parents, as adults, we just have to always set an example, whether you're raising girls or boys, or whether you have nieces and nephews, whatever it is, you have to set them straight, that they can all do the same stuff and root each other on.
Yep.
So
Brooke, we want you to talk a little bit about your mom. Tell us about your mom.
It's the original Huddle, as she said.
Well, Christy B was born in 1949. No, she's one of 5 sisters. My grandfather, her father was a Presbyterian minister, and they grew up in Miami. And my mom met my dad. He was at Georgia Tech. She was at Agnes Scott, 2 Atlanta colleges. They met, dated, married. Voila, here I am. And I've always been really, really tight with her. My dad was a management consultant with Deloitte. He was out of town Monday through Friday. And I just totally grew up thinking that was normal to have a dad on a plane somewhere exotic Monday through Friday. And I remember he would come home and I would like rifle through his bags for all the little trinkets from the hotel rooms and the change. And my mom was my original Huddle. And she was someone who, I was like a 4-year-old kid doing backflips off the neighborhood pool. And I'm sure the parents were like, who is this girl and where are her parents? But my mom supported it and cheered me on. And, as a little girl would, she'd crawl into bed with me and tell me stories in which I was the protagonist and I was, being brave in whatever story she would tell me. And that's the stuff that matters. Those are the building blocks of that. The confidence as a young girl, and then just coming through this crazy, amazing, challenging profession of TV news and having a moment when I was living back at my parents' house at the age of 29 because I moved to take this chance on becoming a correspondent at CNN. And of course, it was right in the middle of the recession. It was 2008. So I landed in Atlanta, and CNN basically said, hey, we think you're really great and we're really excited to have you work for us. But yeah, all the positions are frozen. So hang tight. And I ended up working odd hours at various other networks within the building for a while, and had a moment, which I describe in the end of my book, which my mom and I affectionately refer to as the yellow chair moment, where I'm living at my parents' house and I'm having a giant cry in this sunshine yellow chair in her bedroom. And I'm not a quitter, but I was on the precipice of quitting. I just thought I left a perfectly good job in Washington, D.C. to take this leap. And it wasn't really panning out for me. And she refused to let me quit. And that is my mom in a nutshell. And we've had several yellow chair moments since. And she's even become closer to her sisters in the later years. And she's the best.
Do you think, coming from a family with that many sisters, she was so aware of what it took to be like a brave girl because she was surrounded by so many girls? I'm sure that had to help her, right?
I think she came from a time where they didn't have much. She was a Presbyterian minister. The church would provide the house. She had to bunk with another sister at all times. They had to take care of the younger sisters. It was very Southern in the way of, okay, don't make a fuss. If something's going on, like just keep it under the surface. You know, it was of the like child of the 50s. Just don't talk about it, that kind of thing.
Right.
And she actually wasn't super close with her sisters. Like growing up, I remember we had this one neighbor who she was really close with, but beyond that, I never remember having, huddles of women over to our home to drink wine or anything like that. And so I didn't grow up seeing that, unlike maybe some of my other girlfriends' moms who did have that. And I think only later in life has she grown in her own way. And then, of course, having her daughter writing an entire book about this, I think she's become much more intentional about really becoming close with her sisters and having an all-women's Agnes Scott book club and things like that. So now she really walks the walk.
It's so interesting as we keep changing as we go along.
Isn't it?
Yeah. Which brings me to my next question. So what are you doing now? I know you're leaving CNN soon, which
Speaking
is
of
sad.
taking leaps,
Yeah.
I know.
So what are you off to do?
I am trying to figure it out. If you guys know anyone in executive positions at streaming networks, a couple of things. First of all, this has been such a privileged position and truly a dream job that I have earned every single day and has been like beyond. I'm going to be waterworks walking out of this building next week. But I have surrounded myself with these trailblazing women, and I can't hold space with them and not be the bravest version of myself. And the bravest version of myself, I remember my dad telling me when I was like just starting out in TV, he was like, Brooke, as soon as you get too comfortable somewhere, you got to go. And while this has been such a privilege to have this platform, I got to go. I got to take a leap. I got to do my backflip off the high dive. And I want to stay in journalism, stay in the space of storytelling, like the deep end of storytelling, having time to really sit with whomever it may be, famous people, ordinary, extraordinary Americans, tell their stories, shine lights in places where it's not so bright. And I do believe that streaming is like the next generation of storytelling and having that space to do that. So I have been working with a production company. I am pitching some folks very soon, some ideas. So that number one is a dream, the next dream. And number two, after I announced I was leaving, the Ellen DeGeneres show called me up and asked me to come to LA to guest host that talk show. And it was such a bucket list check. And I would love to be able to go back. And I think something in that space could be interesting too.
Yeah.
But stay tuned.
Well, that was like major. That's a major thing. If you're going to try it out, you might as well do it on Ellen. Right?
Miss Deirdre, hold up the book. Let's show off the book before we blast out of here. Look at
the book.
So this is the
Looking
book
good.
Huddle by Brooke Baldwin. And Brooke, we are super proud to know you. We're super proud to be friends with you.
Love you guys.
And, I sometimes get outshined by John Dorsey and it pisses me off. But the fact that I have the two of you outshining me today doesn't piss me off at all. I just want to point that out to John Dorsey before we break.
I'm just glad there was some makeup left for Deirdre in the house, given that you were going to be on camera
there was
today.
Barely any makeup, and there certainly wasn't any Botox left for Deirdre, Brooke. I can assure you that, okay?
Oh my God.
I can't drink without a straw, but the top of my forehead doesn't move. I just want to make sure everybody knows that.
Right.
But in all seriousness, Brooke, we wish you great success with the book. Thank you so much for joining us on.
Thank you guys so much.
Thanks for letting me.
We're looking forward to the next act of your career. Can't wait.
Of course. Thank you. Stay tuned.
John, you want to take us out of here?
Yep. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to today's Salt Talk for Deirdre Scaramucci's esteemed debut here on Salt Talks. Just a reminder, if you missed any part of this episode or any of our previous episodes, you can access them all on our website, salt.org/talks, or on our YouTube channel, which is called Salt Tube. Please follow us on social media. We're most active on Twitter. You should also follow Brooke, by the way. She's a great follow on social media, as Deirdre, I think, alluded to before we went on the show or during the show. But we're at Salt Conference on Twitter. We're also on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook as well. And please spread the word about these Salt Talks. I'm the proud father of a daughter with another daughter on the way. So I love seeing these types of resources, and we'll make this required reading for my daughters as they grow up. So please spread the word about these SALT Talks. Topics like this are especially dear to our heart. Anthony has a daughter as well. So these issues are very important to us. But
no question.
On behalf of Anthony, Deirdre, the entire SALT team, signing off for today. We hope to see you back here soon again on SALT Talks.